script, I will hijack your entire evening. So, here we go. My name is Kylie. I have a new life in Christ, and I am recovering from self-protection, control, and shame. I was born and raised in a Christian home in Southern California, and being in a family of 7, there was never a dull or quiet moment. I have 2 older siblings and 2 younger siblings, putting me smack dab in the middle, and yes, I grew up feeling like the cliched middle child, often feeling misunderstood, left out, and sometimes even forgotten. I cannot pinpoint an exact day or moment when I met Jesus. Rather, my salvation story is one of many small moments over time. My childhood is littered with memories of church on Sundays, summer camp, and Bible studies. Overall, my childhood memories are sweet and full of love and laughter. We didn't go on big, elaborate vacations, but we had family river trips, we played club sports, and had lots of fun together. There was the typical chaos and fighting, but overall, in my mind, we were the stereotypical big, happy family, or so I thought. Up until I was 13, all I knew was a family who occasionally bickered, but overall enjoyed spending time together. It was the kind of family other people wanted to have. We enjoyed each other, we did things together, and biggest at the time, my parents were still together. But Easter morning of 2005, that all changed. The family I thought I had, the parents I thought I had, was completely shattered. Because what I didn't know until that morning was that for months, years even, pain, hurt, and mistrust had been building between my parents. I had known my parents were going through something. They seemed to be arguing more and more than normal, and it always seemed to be centered around my older brother. That morning had started out like every other Easter, my siblings and I running around the house on an Easter egg hunt, getting dressed up in our matching outfits and going to church. It was all business as usual until we returned home and my parents started fighting. As I'd said, this had become a somewhat regular occurrence, but this one was different. This one kept escalating and escalating to the point of screaming voices and objects being thrown against the wall. I remember sitting on the stairs inside, huddled close to my older sister and 2 younger siblings, listening to my parents yell from the garage. At one point, my older brother stepped over us and proceeded to walk down the stairs and out the front door carrying a duffel bag. I remember running after him and grabbing his arm and asking, "Where are you going? You can't leave us. You're a big brother. You have to stay." He looked me directly in the eyes and responded, "I'm not going to let mom and dad get a divorce because of you, or because of me." Then he turned and walked away. I'm blessed to have strong friendships with all 3 of my siblings, my 3 other siblings, and we often say we're best friends first and family second, except for my older brother. Since the day he left, our relationship has never been the same. He's remained on the outskirts of the family, close but not too close, kind of like he's never really come home. At the time, and for many years after, I can never identify why that moment was so deeply ingrained in me. For a long time, I was angry at my parents, and as that went untreated, it created distance among us. For a long time, I couldn't articulate why that moment was so important, why I was so angry about it, or even fully understand the impact it had had on me. Over the next 5 years before I moved to college, I grew accustomed to the constant up and downs in our household. There would be long seasons where things were good and felt settled, and then long seasons of not being able to remember seeing my dad speak to my mom for months on end. The same cycle was still in motion while I was at college, but it was out of sight and out of mind. I was able to ignore it and all the emotions that it brought with it, the fear, the doubt, the unforgiveness, and all of the pain. Fast forward to 2016 when I was wrapping up an internship with a college campus ministry and preparing to move back to California. This was not at all what I had planned. I had felt a call at age 13 to ministry, and my plan after college was to pursue that. I had a few different options, but after a lot of prayer and counsel, it became clear at the time that the Lord was shutting all of those doors. So what now? I was leaving the place that had become home, leaving behind all my community, my accountability, and moving back to a place that I had no friends, no job, and no plan. And to top it all off, when I moved back home, my parents had separated but remained living in the same house. I spent 10 months in California, alone and hurting, watching my parents' marriage continue to disintegrate, and along with it, my relationships with them. What I didn't know at the time was that resentment and unforgiveness towards both of them had taken root in my heart all those years ago when my brother had left and had been growing and growing for years. I resented them for shattering the family I thought I had, for the uncertainty and pain I experienced, for creating fear around relationships, and for most of all, losing my brother. It wouldn't be until Regen that I would be able to identify the resentment and the anger that had been growing. And it wasn't until Regen that I was able to process through it, pray through it, and ultimately forgive them. Regen helped me understand that just as I am a broken, messed up, and sinful person doing the best I can, so are my parents. They have their own hurts and their own hang-ups, and while they are far from perfect, they are hurt, broken people too who loved me the best they knew how. Through all the ups and downs, somewhere along the way, I'd created a narrative that I had to be strong all the time, emotionally strong. I had to keep it together because there wasn't room to fall apart. There was already too much brokenness around me, and if I fell apart, if I shattered, it was over, because who is there to pick up the pieces? So I got good at powering through, at shutting down any emotion that threatened to pull me under. I hardened myself and my heart so that I wouldn't feel so much. I put up walls to protect myself and keep people out. I wanted to be safe and do whatever I could to make that happen. I found ways to control my environment and relationships because that's how I could protect myself. If people can never truly get behind the walls, they can't ever truly hurt me. It made me falsely believe I can control what I feel, when I feel, and how much it affects me. I remember Christmas a few years back, my mom said to me, "You seem so much harder than you used to be, like you have a lot of walls up." And I responded with, "Yeah, I do, because it hurts too much and it's not worth it." It was better to be hard and closed off than hurting. It was lonely at times, but at least I was in control and I was safe. But that wasn't true. I wasn't in control, and I had a false sense of security. I can't control anyone or anything, no matter how hard I try or even how much I want to. I can't control people so they won't hurt me. I can't control situations I don't like. I can't control my parents. People will hurt me just as I will hurt them. What I eventually realized is that I had built walls so thick and high, trying to control and self-protect, that I had shut out everything, the good and the bad. Because you can't shut off one emotion without shutting off everything. Through Regen, I learned that when I avoid pain, I can create pain in others. I was avoiding some of my closest community, my sisters, my parents, and my friends, and ultimately the Lord. I was shutting them all out to protect myself, but the irony was, in that trying to protect myself, I was actually left hurting and alone. So backtracking a little bit to when I was 13, I found pornography for the first time. As it always does, what started as just pornography eventually evolved into masturbation. And for the next 10 years, I was caught in a cycle of choosing sin, feeling shame, and not knowing what to do. Pornography wasn't a regular occurrence. I would experience long stretches of time where I thought I had overcome it. But inevitably, I would run back to it and would feel shame and guilt. I would tell myself that was the last time. I just needed to be more disciplined and work harder. But big surprise, that never worked. Instead of finding freedom and healing, I continued to be weighed down by negative thoughts and so much shame. And the shame was like a virus, growing and tunneling out into so many different areas of my life, even after I had confessed. I was the good girl who didn't date, didn't do anything super rebellious. I led Bible studies on my college campus and was going into ministry. But that's not the kind of person that deals with this kind of issue, is what I had told myself. And on top of that, I had never heard women talk openly about this, especially in the church. And that created an additional layer of shame because this wasn't even a woman's problem. So there must be something extra wrong with me, right? And so for years, I believed I couldn't say anything. I was too scared of the judgment, of the disappointment, or even the potential anger that I could face. So I stayed silent for a long time, letting the shame grow and grow. And that's exactly what the enemy wants. He wants us isolated, alone, scared, and in bondage. One day in college, I can't remember exactly what triggered this series of events, but I remember thinking, if I don't be completely honest with somebody right now, this will take me under forever. So I called a woman named Michelle, one of the people that had been mentoring me all through college, drove to her house and told her everything. I was scared, I cried a lot, and fumbled through my words. She didn't respond in any of the ways I'd created in my head. She cried with me, met me with love and grace and kindness, which is exactly what Jesus does when we come to him scared and weeping and looking for help and healing. For many years after that day with Michelle, I had a physical freedom, but I was still carrying around the shame. And I kept silent about that for far too long. I began to believe that I couldn't tell anyone, at least not in a big group, and especially never in a setting like this. I had the accountability of my community and had found forgiveness in the Lord. And while I had found freedom, what I hadn't done was process through the shame that had built over the years and had continued to build by refusing to talk about it. That shame had created a lie that I couldn't tell people that part of my story because it was just too much. The same fear of judgment I had before confessing to Michelle still lingered. Everything else in my life was fair game, but not that one thing. Through Regen, I learned that while I had freedom from the thing itself, I was still living in the bondage of shame. I still felt I had to hide that part of my story. I had to protect it so I could protect myself, which would lead me right back into the cycle of trying to control relationships, keeping walls up, and never being fully transparent with people. I have known Jesus practically my whole life. I could tell you all the right answers, and for many years I was doing all the right things. But my heart wasn't totally right. The same walls I had put up with people, I had put up with the Lord. I'd allowed my circumstances, my pain, and my fear to dictate what was true about myself and about God. I believed lies oftentimes more powerful than the truth, and I was believing so many lies. Lies that led me to doubt myself and question who I was made to be, but more importantly, lies about who God really is. I lost sight of God's true character and was believing that God wasn't truly good, he wasn't reliable, and there were things in me that were beyond his redemption. Believing those lies changed the way I interacted with God. I often had an image in my head of myself standing on a bridge with me on one side and God on the other, and tears would be running down my face as they would be running down his, and his arms would be extended to me saying, "Daughter, just come to me." And I couldn't move. My feet were cemented to the floor. As much as I wanted to, I couldn't get my feet to move forward, and I didn't know why. I eventually realized, how can I run towards someone that I don't think is safe? So I got good at faking it, going through the motions and hoping that eventually something would change. But God, he is always faithful and always good, and he loves me more than I can comprehend. He chased me relentlessly, never being satisfied with having parts of me, but wanting all of me. Slowly, I grew tired of trying to be strong and keeping it together. Slowly, God began to break down the walls and false ideas I had created of his character and patiently and lovingly rebuilt who he is. The lies were replaced with the truth that he is good all the time, that he loves me more than I can imagine, and he is a God of restoration and redemption, that he is my God of restoration and redemption. In Regen and through community, I have found healing and freedom from self-protecting, control, and shame and guilt. I have processed forgiveness and discovered new depths of God's love and grace. Coming to Regen and getting to walk alongside some incredible women had a greater impact than I could have ever imagined. I've learned how to put into words things that I hadn't known how to identify and communicate. I learned practically how to pursue amends and forgiveness and let the transformative grace and love of Jesus flood through every part of my life. I am so thankful for how the Lord has used Regen and continues to use it. It has been a few months since I got to finish up, and I always go back to Hosea 2:14, where God is speaking about Israel, and he says, "Therefore, I am now going to allure her. I will lead her into the wilderness and speak tenderly to her." I love that image of God, that he loves us so sweetly and so gently, that he wants to bring us into these quiet places to spend time with him, not for his gain, but simply because he loves me. Thank you.